In the heart of Colorado, Sophie thought she had found the perfect roommate, quiet, friendly, and eager to help with rent. But when her friends start mysteriously vanishing, Sophie discovers a chilling truth. Her new housemate hides a terrifying past. As the darkness around her grows, Sophie realizes she may be the next victim. Can she escape the nightmare before it's too late? Watch as the tension builds and the secrets unravel in this thrilling true crime story. If you're hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more shocking stories like this. Sophie had always struggled with money. College in Colorado was expensive, and living alone in a small apartment was eating away at her savings. So when a soft-spoken girl named Emma answered her roommate ad, Sophie felt a sense of relief. Emma seemed perfect, quiet, friendly, and easy to get along with. She offered to pay her share of rent up front, which made Sophie feel even more at ease. But soon, Sophie started noticing strange things. Emma rarely left the apartment and kept mostly to herself. At night, Sophie would hear faint sounds from Emma's room, like whispers or low sobs. One evening, Sophie decided to knock on Emma's door to check in, but when she opened it, Emma was sitting perfectly still at her desk, staring at a photo of Sophie's childhood friends. Sophie froze. The photo was old, and Emma's face looked almost uncomfortably familiar. Sophie didn't recognize it at first, but the unease lingered. Sophie's life began to unravel when her close friends, Liz and Mark, started to go missing. They had both been regular visitors at the apartment, but suddenly, Sophie couldn't reach them. Liz's phone went straight to voicemail for days, and Mark was nowhere to be found. Sophie chalked it up to coincidence, but deep down, she felt something darker was at play. As she tried to get in touch with both of them, Sophie began to realize that something strange was happening in the apartment. Emma seemed unbothered by their absence. Even when Sophie expressed her concern, Sophie's mind raced. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Emma, her quiet, friendly roommate, had something to do with their disappearances. The more time passed, the stranger Emma's behavior became. She no longer attended classes, instead spending her days in the apartment, pacing silently. Emma became even quieter, barely acknowledging Sophie when they passed each other in the hallway. Sophie had to admit, there was something unsettling about Emma, something that didn't sit right. One evening, Sophie returned early from a study session to find the apartment unervingly quiet. She walked down the hallway to her bedroom and froze when she saw Emma sitting in the dark, muttering to herself. Sophie's heart raced as she heard Emma whisper, "It's almost time. They won't know what hit them." Sophie's blood ran cold. She didn't know what to make of it, but she knew she couldn't ignore this any longer. Sophie decided to dig deeper into Emma's background, but the more she researched, the more unsettling things became. There were no records of Emma attending any of the schools she claimed, and her social media was sparse, with only a few random posts. Sophie grew desperate. She searched for any clue that would explain Emma's erratic behavior. Then, Sophie found an old missing persons flyer online. The face on the flyer was unmistakable. Emma was listed as a suspect in a string of disappearances in another state. Sophie's heart pounded as she read the details. Emma, whose real name, it seemed, was Anna, had been wanted for years. She had a dark history. Sophie's stomach churned as she realized the truth. Her roommate was hiding a horrifying past. Sophie could no longer ignore the chilling truth. She had to confront Emma. That evening, as Emma sat in the living room, Sophie walked in with a sense of dread. "Who are you really?" Sophie demanded, her voice trembling. Emma looked up, a cold smile creeping across her face. "You should have known from the start," she replied, her voice eerily calm. Emma, or rather Anna, revealed the details of her past. She was a runaway, someone who had spent years evading the law after killing her foster family in a violent outburst. She had been hiding behind a new identity for years, changing her name, her appearance, everything, so she could escape her dark history. Sophie felt as if the ground had been ripped from beneath her. Emma, Anna, had been lying to her all along. The revelation hit Sophie like a ton of bricks. She had let a killer into her life. Anna, wasn't just some shy, quiet roommate. She was a predator, someone who had been on the run for years. Sophie couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, her mind racing, trying to process what she had learned. As she lay there, she heard faint footsteps outside her door. Sophie's heart raced. She knew Anna wasn't just going to let her go. Sophie had unknowingly become a part of Anna's twisted game, and she wasn't sure how to escape. But she had to try. The fear that gripped her was unbearable. But it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her friends, Liz and Mark, and whether they were still alive. Sophie could no longer pretend that everything was fine. Anna had lured her into a game she couldn't escape from. Every day, Sophie watched as Anna's behavior became more erratic, more controlling. She began to lock the doors at night, afraid that Anna would hurt her if she got too close. But it wasn't enough. Anna had already infiltrated her life, and Sophie knew she had no choice but to fight back. One night, as Sophie sat in the living room, Anna came in, her eyes dark with intent. "You can't run," Anna said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You'll always be mine." Sophie couldn't let fear paralyze her any longer. She had to find a way to survive. Sophie was determined to take action. She had contacted the police, but they seemed dismissive of her fears. They didn't understand the danger she was in. The next evening, she decided to confront Anna, to force her to admit what she had done. Sophie walked up to Anna, heart pounding in her chest. Anna smiled. "You really think you can stop me?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. Sophie took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." But before she could react, Anna lunged at her, a knife glinting in her hand. Sophie dodged, barely avoiding the strike. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This was it. She had to fight back or risk becoming Anna's next victim. Sophie ran for the door, but Anna was faster. She slammed the door shut, trapping Sophie inside. Sophie's mind raced as she looked around for an escape. She had no weapons, no allies, just her wits. Anna's twisted smile remained as she slowly approached, knife raised. Sophie's thoughts flashed to her friends Liz and Mark, who had been missing for weeks. She couldn't let Anna hurt anyone else. She lunged forward, grabbing a nearby lamp and using it as a weapon. She swung it at Anna, knocking her off balance. Anna growled, a deep, guttural sound, as she scrambled to get up. The fight was brutal, but Sophie's determination fueled her. She couldn't let Anna win. The longer they struggled, the more Sophie realized just how much she had underestimated her roommate. Anna wasn't just a killer. She was a master manipulator, always staying 2 steps ahead. But Sophie wasn't going down without a fight. Just as Anna lunged at her again, Sophie saw her chance. She grabbed the knife that Anna had dropped earlier and, with a swift motion, disarmed her. The blade trembled in her hand, but Sophie was resolute. She stood over Anna, breathing heavily, as she looked into her eyes. "It's over," Sophie whispered. "You won't hurt anyone again." The police arrived just in time to arrest Anna, who was left cowering in the corner defeated. Sophie stood by, exhausted, watching as Anna was hauled away. She couldn't believe it. The nightmare was finally over, but the relief was fleeting. Sophie's mind kept flashing back to the things Anna had said, the cold, calculating ways she had manipulated everyone around her. Liz and Mark's bodies were found a few days later, and Sophie's heart shattered. She had failed to save them in time, but at least Anna would never hurt anyone else again. Sophie had survived, but she knew she'd never forget the terror she had faced. The final confrontation with Anna left her breathless, and when it was over, Sophie was left standing victorious. But the battle had cost her. Sophie would never forget what she had been through, but she had finally faced a monster who had haunted her. She had won, but the scars would remain. The past would always follow her. Anna's arrest sent shockwaves through the town, leaving everyone in disbelief. The quiet, friendly girl who had once charmed her way into Sophie's life and the lives of her friends, was now behind bars, her dark secrets exposed for all to see. As the police led Anna away in handcuffs, Sophie stood in the background numb. It was hard to believe this was the same person who had shared late-night talks with her, who had smiled so innocently while hiding a horrifying past. The trial was swift, and the evidence stacked against Anna was overwhelming. Sophie attended each day, her heart heavy as the prosecutors detailed Anna's cruel actions. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murders of Liz and Mark. It was a harsh sentence, but it felt like justice. Still, Sophie couldn't help but feel a gnawing emptiness inside. Her friends were gone, and no number of years could bring them back. In the months that followed, Sophie tried to piece her life back together. She moved out of the apartment that had once felt like a safe haven, but now carried too many dark memories. The new place was smaller, quieter, a fresh start. Sophie returned to college, taking up a new major, focusing all her energy on her studies. She tried to embrace normalcy, to surround herself with kind, trustworthy people. It wasn't easy, but gradually, the weight on her chest began to lighten. She even made new friends, though none of them could ever replace Liz and Mark. Still, for the first time since everything happened, Sophie smiled without feeling like it was a mask. Life was moving on, and for the most part, she was moving with it. But the memories of Anna, Liz, and Mark were never far from Sophie's mind. The quiet, creeping thought of what had happened still haunted her, especially in the dead of night when she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She would think of Anna's chilling smile, the way she had lured them into her trap. The pain of losing Liz and Mark was unbearable at times. Liz's laugh, Mark's teasing grin, gone, stolen in an instant by someone they had trusted. Sometimes, Sophie would catch herself staring out of a window, wondering what could have been if she had seen the signs earlier, if she had trusted her instincts. But there were no answers, only questions that would never be fully answered. One evening, as Sophie walked through a crowded cafe, she found herself smiling at a stranger. The woman looked familiar, but Sophie couldn't place her. For a split second, her heart raced, panic rising in her chest. The thought that she could be walking into another trap, that someone could slip into her life the same way Anna had, terrified her. But then, just as quickly, the moment passed. Sophie's smile was genuine, not forced. She realized something important in that fleeting moment. She had made it. Despite the pain, despite the horror, Sophie had survived. She had rebuilt herself from the rubble Anna had left behind. She would never forget her friends or the darkness that had entered her life, but she was no longer defined by it. Sophie had learned to be cautious, to trust her instincts more than her desire for connection. She knew that meeting new people would always come with risks, but she also knew that she was stronger than she had been before. The past might always linger in the back of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. Sophie walked out of the cafe, feeling the cool air of the Colorado evening wrap around her, the weight of her past finally lifting. She was ready for the future, but she would always remain vigilant, careful not to repeat the past, aware that not everyone who seemed friendly had good intentions. As the years went by, Sophie's life continued to settle into a new rhythm. She graduated college with honors, earned a steady job in a field she was passionate about, and even started to build new friendships that felt real, rooted in trust and understanding. Yet, there were moments when her past still found its way into her thoughts. Late nights when the world was quiet, Sophie would sit alone, reflecting on everything that had happened. She would wonder if Liz and Mark would have been proud of how she had rebuilt herself. But even in those moments, she found peace. The pain had dulled. The sharpness of the grief faded like the distant echo of a long-forgotten dream. She had lived through something many couldn't even imagine, and yet, here she was, stronger than ever. The past never fully disappeared, but Sophie had finally found peace. The memories of Liz and Mark would always linger, but the pain of their loss was no longer a constant companion. Sophie had moved on, her strength forged through the darkest of times. She had learned the hard way how to protect herself, how to trust her instincts, and how to move forward without forgetting the lessons of her past. As she stood on the balcony of her apartment one evening, watching the Colorado sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sophie realized that while she would always carry the scars of what happened, they no longer defined her. She had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, and the future now held endless possibilities. She was careful, more cautious than before, but she was ready for whatever came next. And this time, she knew she would be prepared. The past could haunt her, but it would never control her again.